Hello, everyone, and welcome to our December Connect event. It's wild that we're already at the end of the year here, just tap dancing on 2024, ready for that to come in. So I'm just going to give everyone a moment to come on in. We appreciate each and every one of you. We are hitting record numbers for our events each month. So please continue to like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. Share with your friends, colleagues, and coworkers within your organization. And just share the good feelings. Whatever's working for you, share that. We would love to hear too how this is supporting you on your journey. And so as everyone is coming in, hey everyone, I'm Dr. Dave Hester, leader here at LifeGuides, and I want to introduce you to a couple of internal leaders. When I say internal leaders, I mean these two have led me in different ways, in different times, really specifically to help me with my equanimity or kind of being balanced, which is what we're talking about today, especially in light of everything that's going on. So I'll keep my intro short so I can give them just a wonderful love that they deserve. So first, let's start with Jenna. Jenna is a Filipina American from San Diego. She is an emotionally optimistic and dedicated, joyful person who always provides her service to others. As a certified life guide and a part-time caregiver, as well as a personal support manager for her mother's mental health, she is currently exploring the projects in the mental health and well-being industry. In her past corporate life, Jenna was a full-stack people consultant in HR. We welcome you again. I believe this is your second time. So,
second run, yeah.
All right, we got to get you a jacket. You know, we have to get like
I got my LifeGuides stitch, but
all right, merch works. I've got mine too. I've got my my Elmo.
Oh yes.
Which is
oh yes, I remember from last time too. Hello
right,
everyone.
All right,
Sarah.
Welcome again. And so next, I want to introduce just a wonderful human being and soul who I love to talk to. I learn something every time I connect with him. Talking about Christopher G. Christopher G holds a master's degree in occupational therapy and psychology and is a holistic health practitioner focused on regenerative solutions unique to your life path. He divides his time between Costa Rica and New Mexico, building community, integrating principles of biodynamic agriculture and somatic repatterning techniques. So first off, that is interesting in itself. I want to go back to the somatic repatterning techniques. I think that might be appropriate for what we're talking about here. But also Christopher served 13 years in the Army as a traveling musician, and his LifeGuides expertise includes navigating the VA, self-acceptance, power of gratitude, aging parents, and more. Welcome, Christopher G. So this is also is this your second time as well?
Yep, correct. Yeah, right. It's a real honor to be here with you all. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Outstanding. All right. Any more twos, just throw them in the chat. We're on a roll here. So everyone, I know we're coming in real warm and fuzzy during a not so warm and fuzzy time. The recent world events, including the Israel-Hamas war, the continued conflict in Ukraine and Russia, just conflicts popping up around the world. I'm noticing, not only as a clinician, as a leader here at LifeGuides, that people are becoming more and more disturbed, whether it be vicarious trauma because of what they're consuming. Social media has continued to just show the deadly and just ridiculous nature of human beings in these destructive situations. So we wanted to turn the camera on ourselves and see how can we remain peaceful, you know, when we're in such a polarizing world. We're coming up on an important year for us. And I'm not talking about the election. I'm talking about an important year because of the advancement of AI. We're talking about how are we going to build a peaceful world when we have such powerful tools coming into play. So the vision for this conversation is to talk about how we can remain not only emotionally calm, but I was talking about equanimity earlier. It's a fun, $5 word for saying peace, just everything's okay. My kid recently shared a song with me called "How Did I Get So Calm." It's a song by a British bloke, but it's so funny because throughout the video, terrible things happens to this gentleman. A gold ball drops on his car, and he just dusted it off like it's no biggie. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about equanimity. That's that ability to, take in those things that are sometimes just terrible, to see, feel, hear, all the senses, but still have that sense of tranquility and balance within oneself. That's what we're going to talk about today. So I want to, again, kind of turn the tables and ask a question. I'm going to start with you, Christopher, just on how do you establish a well-being action plan? And Jenna, right after, I'd like to hear from you as well.
Thank you.
A well-being action plan. That is a great question, Dr. Dave. Well, starting from foundational fundamentals, for me, so much of my action plan resides in my relationship to my breath. And I realize that from moment to moment, there are going to be changes that I cannot control in my external reality. But what I do have control and connection over is the rate and depth of my breath. So if I use my breath as a modulator, if you will, to whatever is being played out in my reality from a moment to moment basis, I can return to the breath as a place of refuge and solace that actually helps me stay more focused and grounded, regardless of what's happening in the exterior. So the action plan for me is a perpetual offering and even a consideration I have for myself of just asking in any given moment, how connected to my breath am I right now? Can my breath be a little deeper? Can it be a little longer? Can it be a little slower? And just perpetually return to this knowing that your breath is what will allow you to stay grounded and rooted firmly in the present, in the now. And from there, any action plan that you wish to take can be embarked upon with greater ease, tranquility, equanimity. And it seems like the action becomes more effortless. There's like an effortless action in a flow state than there needs to be in any kind of got to make it happen, got to happen, blah, 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 whatever rapid fire hustle that we're conditioned and accommodated to. That can be just recognized for what it is. So I would say any action plan has got to start with a fundamental relationship to the breath for me.
Dr. Dave and Christopher, that was amazing. And to the group who's online, I wanted to start with two things. In terms of a tip, you had mentioned social media and then the world we're in, and I had shared this out prior to this event, but if you get to choose how you take in your news and media. And so I'll share my personal example, and it maybe can relate to the folks on this event, or if you're watching it via recording. For instance, I'm with my mom a lot, and her generation, they like to watch the news. And so she watches the news like daily at whatever, the 6 o'clock news, the 7 o'clock news. They have their favorite news anchor. But maybe my tip would be, and I had suggested to her, if you realize, oh my gosh, I've been watching the news, that's my habit, but I'm watching the news because how am I going to get the news feed? But I'm so like shocked and I'm just ingesting and consuming like all the horrible things that we're viewing on the news. And so I told my mom, you guys could make a choice. Like, you don't have to watch the news and visually see the trauma and all the devastation. Why don't you try just reading the highlights? So maybe you guys could test an experiment, try reading news and like the updates, and that way you don't have to actually visually see all the devastation. But if you have this attachment, like you need to find out what's going on in the world today, maybe just shift and try a technique of reading the news or just capturing the highlights, and test yourself and just say, I don't need to consume all the bad that's being fed to us, visually, and all the data. So if you could just make a shift by like, okay, I'm going to capture my news, but I'm going to do it in another form, maybe not so much looking at the news at 6 o'clock, right? So just give you some tips, because sometimes people are so attached, like, how am I going to know what's going on in the world? But maybe you could just read about it and not visually see, because they're intentionally giving us like the worst content in the news, right? They're reporting on like the devastation. And when you consume that, ingest that, it's going to take a toll, and be aware, like you'll feel on the inside. I literally was just passing through the living room. I said, Mom, I just was passing by. And in the 15 minutes, they haven't reported on anything good. Like, are you from this segment? You're going to sit down and devote your time for 45 minutes. I hope there's going to be some positive news that they're going to mix it up, but it just seems like it's always the devastation, and there's good things that are happening around the world. And so maybe you could seek that out, and again, finding it, you could search it up, like be intentional about searching up the good news as well, and just try shifting to reading it versus like watching the news. My second point would be like, to piggyback on your breath work, take the time to connect with nature. I did this practice. I practiced what I preach. So I was feeling overwhelmed yesterday, and so what I like to do is I got in the car and I just put myself at the top of the list. I put my inner peace at the top of the list. So I drove myself to a beautiful lake, and in that park there was a lake and there was trees and there was dogs, and so I just like connected with nature and like observe what was around me. And there was this beautiful tree that had fall leaves, and I just took in visually like every single color, and it was like the vibrant orange and the yellow and the greens. And then I kind of was like, what do I smell? And it was just like fresh cut grass and like pine of the trees, and then I could hear the birds chirping. And so you'll and I could notice, and I was aware that inside, like I was shifting to a piece of calm and tranquility, and it really made an absolute difference. So just some tips on, again, if you connect with nature and just prioritize like getting away from the noise, it could make an incremental difference, little by little, tiny steps.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So one other thing I wanted to kind of go into is we're talking about boundaries. How do you create tech boundaries? How do you create boundaries with the information that you're opening yourself to? Because there is a bit of consent in that. When we see these traumatic images or inflammatory commentary, or clickbait titles that are supposed to excite a level of response, we consent when we click, when we open that up. And if any of you are using YouTube or social media, you're probably well aware the algorithm will switch as soon as you click on something, even if you really didn't like it. But if you've hovered for just enough, it's going to continue to show that, or it's going to continue to show you that type of content over and over again. So talking about boundaries, I wanted to ask, what is the role of boundaries in maintaining inner peace? So let's start with you, Christopher, and then yet again, please help us out, Jeff.
Yeah.
The role of boundaries in maintaining inner peace is crucial, and it's very subjective. So I can't tell somebody what my threshold for being exposed to certain calibers of information is versus someone else's, because we're all in different spectrums in terms of what we can intake. But I will say that for simplicity purposes, what I've had to recognize that is, you mentioned the word consent, Dr. Dave, and this is paramount in understanding that our attention is the most prized and sought after commodity in the world. It's your attention, not necessarily your intention, but your attention. And where that attention is placed is where the energy flows. So if we have awareness of where our attention is being placed, and we can recognize it, that our attention is being placed on something that has a particular vibration of negativity, of lack, of whatever the frequency is, just know that you are essentially consenting to that energy being reciprocated onto you. That's the agreement that occurs. Where we place our attention is where the energy flows. So in becoming very discerning and just truthful and honest with oneself of, where am I placing my awareness at in any given part of the day? What am I looking at? When I'm looking at something, am I disconnected from my breath? Am I out of my body? Am I living in some sort of realm that is classified as maybe the collective, where you as a highly individuated, spirit or soul, you have complete control over where you place your focus and awareness. So it's kind of like giving oneself a little bit of tough love and recognizing, like, where I'm placing my awareness isn't really where my greatest intention is. So, what do I need to shift? What pattern needs to be recognized in order for it to be broken and shifted in a compassionate way? Always with more compassion, more self love, and just being truthful and honest. Like, wow, I'm watching news 1 to 2 hours a day and it's just not really sitting so well with me. What pattern am I willing to break today, or that's being asked to be broken? And then you can start to kind of incrementally implement some changes. Like any detoxification plan, I specialize in customized detox plans for people. And it's not just biological and physiological, it's cultural, because the culture is where the knowledge is. And if the culture is intoxicating to a point where it's creating hindrances to the flow and balance of equanimity in the body, then we have to culturally detoxify from that. And that takes time. And if we pull away too rapidly, then you can create what's called a healing crisis in the body, where the sudden flood of toxins in the system is overwhelming to the body's ability to not only process, but eliminate that garbage and the toxins. So be easy on yourself, take it slow, and recognize that these patterns have been building up for a really, really long time. And sometimes just admitting that we've been locked in the pattern can start the process of breaking the pattern and implementing greater boundaries with oneself. And there again, always with greater self-love. That's always the answer.
Always with compassion too. Jenna, how about you? What are your thoughts?
So again, to just emphasize our key words, boundaries and like incrementally. So I want to go direction of, let's, when you're with your loved ones, with your relatives, friends, and family, let's be intentional and on purpose. Start small incrementally, and let's create tech-free zones. So whether that be at meal times when you're with your loved ones, let's create, okay, during dinners, lunch, breakfast, during this family time, it's going to be a tech-free zone. So everyone's going to, put your devices in another room, just not have it at an arm's reach or fingertips. And let's be present and just like enjoy one another. So again, starting with that a meal time and do it incrementally, and then also do activities that are maybe analog that don't require digital means, whether it be board games or cards or even car rides. That could be an area for tech-free zones with your children, loved ones, again, relatives, parents. And if you're intentional with it, if you just start small, it could grow to like, wow, we didn't really need that. It's just kind of a default, right? So in the space of boundaries, let's try and create tech-free zones. And then with yourself, let's say you're going to go on a walk, maybe go back to the analog watch, like take off or put your device in a safe space, and then your Apple Watch, your digital watch, in a safe space. And if you need to know the time, then bring an analog watch, and then just know that you're going to be okay if you're away and not connected for 30 minutes, because at least within, so if you just start 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you're going to realize, and trust me, you're going to realize, oh my God, because then you're giving yourself that time back, so just again, creating tech-free zones and space for yourself and then with your loved ones. Those are some cool tips. And then again, because that's a boundary in itself.
And these boundaries are, again, when people hear boundaries, they typically think of someone just harshly saying, get away from me, I need boundaries. And it's
Right.
typically not like that. We have to all work on boundaries. We all have to be better at setting boundaries for, especially for us, knowing how things affect us. For example, I track my heart rate variability and my heart rate. And so when I'm consuming certain content or I'm, watching, let's say a serious correspondence about current wartime, I check, hey, am I breathing, like, and most people are like, well, of course you're breathing, you're alive. But it's like, no, really check in. Am I breathing?
Check in.
What is my breathing like? What is my heart rate? Oh wow, this thing gets my heart rate up. Why is that? Maybe I should not consume or engage in that consistently. And I've seen people from all walks of life when it comes to these conflicts in the world. I've connected with people who are, protesters who want to see, peace in the world. I've seen people who would rather just not engage at all and be I think one person called it willfully agnostic, like they just don't know. They just are out of it. But each one, regardless of how they engage, are still affected.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to take a quick turn and talk about, you know, children, even some adults who may be elderly and may have some delays. How can we support others developing peace within themselves? And for me, I'll say it starts with developing peace within myself. But I wanted to ask you, Jenna, because both of you have the caregiver role. So how do you help with cultivating peace for others? We'll start with you, Jenna.
So I been spending all this time with my mom. Well, first of all, there could be people, right? So whether it's your parents or like grandparents, so not only it's the teenagers, even like the elderly and seniors and grandparents, aunts and uncles, they could be addicted to the screens too. So you could be looking, because my parents, they're I see them and they're addicted to their screen. So I was like, are you guys screenagers? So I'm always like, you guys should probably take, because they're learning a new thing and then they're like, and it's just like candy. So I will be with my parents. I was like, you guys should take a break from your phones because they're just like glued to their phone, whatever it be. But I think what it is I'll kind of share out my techniques that I do with myself, and then I'll have my mom try it. So when I feel and when I notice her being anxious or like her breath is like kind of almost hyperventilating, I'll kind of pull her away and I'll just say, hey, mom, you're looking a little anxious. Let's try this method. So out loud, I said, let's try and count backwards. And I've tried it with myself. So I go, let's start from, if you're really, really heightened with anxiety, if you count backwards out loud. So with her, I go, let's start with just 20, right? So we would just together look at each other and talk, out loud and just say 20, 19, 18. So if you just kind of do it slowly and you'll notice you're doing it with your breath and go all the way down to 0 incrementally, it could make a difference. Now with me, I tried this yesterday and I was telling the team before we jumped on this event, I was feeling a little frazzled. So when I was at the park, I started from 50 and I just went all the way down and it just made a significant difference. So that would be one technique that I would, share out. And then sometimes it's something like, my mom loves to fidget, so it would be like, hey, we introduced finger knitting, because with finger knitting you get that yarn, the loops and the holes are big enough. And so we went on YouTube just to give her a little demo, and then we got away from it, and then we together did it at a table. And then I had never done it myself, but it was just a suggestion. And so I found it so relaxing. So here I am doing this finger knitting. And whatever your hobby or craft is just you turn back to that, or try something new. There's something about trying the newness of something. And so my mom like finger knitted this huge blanket that it was just, then she got to see like the achievement. And so then there was more finger yarn on sale, so we bought more. So we got like scarves and little blankets and throw blankets. So finger knitting, the counting backwards, all the way from whatever number you want to start at, down to 0, and just be aware of the breath, and it just introduces like the calm and some techniques. And it does start, Dr. Dave, with yourself, and then you try it and suggest it with others. And so be open to trying like new methods and techniques. And there's something about neurology that your body's like, how cool, I did something different, versus the routine or the monotony of what your life is already, kind of your lifestyle is right now.
Absolutely, we crave novelty. And so
Novelty, yeah.
Over to you, Christopher. I mean, first off, Jenna, thank you for sharing that. I love those ideas because those work for not just adults, but for children too.
Yeah.
Christopher, what do you think? How can you continue to cultivate peace for others?
When I was listening to you speak, Jenna, this phrase came to mind that I've been hearing a lot recently. It's been becoming more and more popular in the self-help realm. And that phrase is, be the change you want to see. And when I think about others and being in the presence of others who are distraught, they're clearly out of balance, they're dysregulated, they're out of their bodies, whatever it is. for me, what I've accepted that how I can best help them is to be that contrast in the moment that will remind them on typically a subconscious level that it's safe to feel whatever they're feeling. Because even though they may not be able to verbally actualize or express that, okay, I'm feeling unsafe, the reality is there's a reason why they feel unsafe right now, and they may not know what it is. So how can I be that refuge for them that reminds them that the safety they're seeking is actually found within themselves? It's not something outside of them that's going to bring them the safety. So I've gone through a process in my own just evolution and finding myself in very heightened scenarios where it's like whatever the moment demands, obviously I will respond in kind to. But overwhelmingly, that demand is to reciprocate whatever heightened arousal there is, the calmer I get, and the softer I get, and the slower I get. And I literally slow it down to a point where it literally sends a shock in the system. They don't know what to do. They're like, what are you doing? Some funny stuff going on there. Getting all slow and quiet. What's happening? That is that's the door opening to the subconscious mind where they're starting to ask, like, there's a break in the pattern. You're not responding in like arousal. How come you're not as anxious as I am? You should be as stressed out as I am. Provide me with solutions. Give me what I want right now. I think those days are coming to an end, like with the codependent nature of solving someone else's problems for them is becoming really limited. And we're stepping into a period of radical responsibility where if we truly want to see the peace materialize in our external reality, it has to be claimed and cultivated within first. I don't see any other way out of it at this point.
One more thing. Also, if you're the type of individual, sometimes it's like that mantra. And so if the noise gets to be too loud, maybe say out loud, I deserve peace. I deserve tranquility. I deserve ease and calm. It's like if you say that 3 times, like, and tell yourself, sometimes people just need to just stop and pause and say, I deserve peace. I deserve calm. I deserve to feel ease on the inside. And just repeat it, and then all of a sudden you're going to believe it, because it's really about rerouting. Just like stop the gremlin or whatever noisy roommate or inner scripts and just reroute it and switch it up to some sort of statement that you could say out loud, or even again connect with nature, light a candle and just stare at that beautiful flame to just get you away from the noise and reroute. All these little tidbits.
And when you say reroute, of course, I'm thinking about traveling.
Yeah,
And
so
we're
just
all
pretend
kind
like
of
you have
traveling.
your own inner ways or inner Google, Google Maps and Apple Maps, and just like, I'm gonna reroute. I'm not gonna, be in this space, you know what I mean? And be on, again, do it on purpose.
Yes. So we do have a question in Q&A that came in, and I do want to read it because I think it's appropriate. And then right after, I want to talk a little bit more about building healthy environments, and specifically safe environments. So this is actually a good kickoff. So the question is from Brianna. Thank you for your question. And it says, so I'm in such a low spot with myself lately. I realize I do too much for everyone and not enough for myself. I'm starting to lose myself with all of this. How do you start to set boundaries for people who are so used to you being there? This is a great question. And the first place I would just ask you to start is to assess what it is you're willing to do, what it is you're okay doing, and really assess that. Because if you're like me, you've been in situations where you said yes to something you really don't want to do, but because you're a pleaser, or because you're a caregiver, or because you're a healer, you're like, I'm just going to do it anyway. And 3 statements are really good for building boundaries when you're connecting with others. And this works in business. This also works at home. Dr. Nate Rieger, who created what's called Orpo, which is a wonderful, you can find him at Next Element. Orpo is, openness, persistence, resilience, and then back to openness. He kind of taught me these statements, which is to ask, I need statements. So letting someone know, I need 5 minutes so I can recharge. How can you help me get that? I expect statements. I expect when I, tell you that I'm not going to contact you after hours, after 5 p.m. business time, I expect you to respect that ask of me because I want to show up the best I can. And I show up the best when I'm not, sending emails at 8 p.m. And also, I need to be transparent. Sorry to anybody on the team that I did send, emails after 5 p.m. We're on a different time zone. I'm sorry about that. But that's also just me being accountable. So I expect, and then I want statements. Like, hey, I want to work on this. I want to create a healthier environment. How can we do that together? And just know that when you're setting boundaries, it's just like a muscle. It's going to be tense and tight and uncomfortable at first, but in time, as time continues to pass on, those muscle fibers are going to band together and become stronger and stronger, and you'll be stronger. So I wanted to give both of you an opportunity if you had anything else to add to, how to start. Jenna, go ahead.
Brianna, I want to let you know, thank you for sharing your question. For others on the phone that can relate to her question, I wanted to kick off and say, I see you, I hear you. I'm sending you warmth and comfort and a bridge line of strength. Feel free to contact me on link on LifeGuides. But I wanted to share, I actually had to create a boundary because and say that to my loved ones and relatives and parents because I was feeling kind of overwhelmed and kind of tapped out. And so I kindly told my relatives, like, I love you guys, but I'm going to put myself at the top of the list. If you could be mindful and know that I need to recharge and create a healthy boundary, so I'm prioritizing myself. So I'm going to put myself at the top of the list. So yes, you do have these requests of me, but you're going to have to be mindful of my timeline, my availability, my energy, my heart space and head space. And so just give me some time. Let's schedule something, but I'm not available to drop everything to rescue you, or you just be mindful of my schedule. And again, I'm putting myself at the top of the list because I'm feeling a little bit tapped out. So if you could just kind of like what I've offered you, if you could just give me that time and space to recharge, we're going to take care of it together, but you have to be mindful of my availability, my timeline, my priorities. And then once you share that, they're just like, oh my God, absolutely. Like, oh, I wasn't thinking, because they're just, I think maybe you're their default person and just say, hey, I love you. But again, I'm putting myself at the top of the list. I have to prioritize my health, wellness, and well-being.
Mm-hmm. I would say that your power is always in your response. It's not in the reaction. So if somebody is demanding things or our attention from us, but we are unable to give that to them in a complete, authentic manner, which is truly how we all wish to show up, then we essentially can owe it to ourselves on a level of self-love to recognize what we don't have to give. If our glass is half full, then we need to take a step back and refill that glass so that we have more to give. And that's where the boundary comes in, because the boundary is the containment field that we're building. We're building a container for us to recharge and tend to what is being tended to that only we can tend to before we go back out and we can offer. And the power is always in the response. And it's funny, it keeps coming back to that word responsibility, our ability to respond in the moment. And when we start to put space around our responses and just letting someone know, I will get back to you as soon as I can, I'm thinking about this, that just lets them know, hey, wow, they acknowledged me, and they'll come back. And so when you do come back, it's from a place of empowerment, and you're recharged, and you're no longer feeling at the whims and demands of others, and you can be much more effective in supporting them. And there's no telling how they're going to take it, right? That's the risk that we take when we start implementing boundaries and greater compassion and self-love and responsibility, is we can't manage their reactions. You may be the first person in their life that tells them these kinds of boundaries, that actually puts some implementations in line and says, this is how I'm rolling these days. And they're going to be like, wait, what? Well, that's not up to us to manage. We just send them blessings and unconditional love, and how they deal with that is their work. That's their time.
And when you say their work, I immediately think about, we're talking about a polarizing world. We're talking about, sides as people are kind of taking right now. How can someone feel safe, when you're made to feel that you have to, take a side, take up arms, and dig in for a fight? How can we create a safe space, at work or even at home? What does that look like? What does that feel like to have a safe space? And I think this is a good question for everyone to ask themselves within their organizations, within their homes. How can you create a space uh, that feels safe? And so, Jen, I want to ask you, what does that look like, or what does that feel like to you? Give me some examples of a place that you felt safe in, and what were some of the characteristics of
With me, it's for me, I could speak my experiences is usually in when I'm kind of going to bed, you know what I mean? When I'm just kind of scanning for the good each day, in a sense of gratitude. But I'm always like, okay, even if it was a challenging day, it's just like that quiet time to myself, whether I'm like getting ready for bed or I'm in bed and taking the time to scan for the good, or if it's maybe midday where I'm just kind of taking a meditative pause. And it starts with, I guess, self. And so I could, for instance, at nighttime, I'll sit there and zoom all the way out and just start with like the practical things, like tell myself I feel safe. I have a roof over my head. I have clothes on my back. I have access to clean water. I know when my next meal is coming. I'm grateful and thankful that the city I live in is peaceful. The street I live in is quiet. You know what I mean? So, and I'm always like, I'm faith based, so I say, you know, in my faith, like, thank goodness, thank God, that thank the Lord, thank our Heavenly Father, thank the universe that outside my house there's not a war going on. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of like taking awareness and recognize what's happening around you. And then I just zoom out and just kind of think of like the practicalness of in telling myself I'm in a safe space and I'm grateful. And so I think those essential life needs, then it just kind of creates that safety. You know what I mean? And recognizing that and calling it out and being aware what's happening and just like, oh my gosh, I am safe right now.
Mhm.
Hmm. I would say it's in the proclamation. You're proclaiming, you're letting the field, the universe, however you want to see it, know that you are in a state of safety. And it's only ever found in the now. It was never found back then, and it's certainly not going to be found in the future. So, how do we return to this perpetual knowing that simply by connecting with your being in this very moment, you can embody the emotions of safety? And like you said, it's about really feeling into what does it feel like to be safe, really evoke the emotion of it. Think back to a time in your life where, depending on who you were with, if you were just in nature, what did that feeling elicit in your body? And is that an uplifting emotion or an elevated emotion that we can bring forth right now, which I'm so grateful you hit on, both Dr. Dave and Jenna, is that the baseline is always the gratitude. It's about being grateful in this very moment for the breath that you breathe, and accepting that if you can find safety in this now moment through just the simplest act of paying attention to your breath, then nobody can really take that from you. And maybe that's where we're being offered the opportunity to recontextualize what safety really is. And that I return to this mantra of all I need is within me now. And if I just return to that knowing that it's all within me now, then all of this just becomes icing on the cake, or maybe something else on the cake. We'll just leave it at that. But it's it's about just returning to the knowing that only you can find that for yourself, and it's no one else's responsibility to tell it for us, really.
Yes, we all have that responsibility to do it for ourselves, but then also to help cultivate it for others. Because as the both of you were speaking, I immediately started to think about my worldview. So I have a different worldview than my children, my family, probably, many people on this call. And so I see the world as good, as generally a good place. There are some people who grew up from terrible backgrounds, terrible traumas, and so they see the world in an anxious way or in a negative way. Then there's other people who are experience, like when you said, Jenna, thankful that and in gratitude that war is not necessarily outside of my front door. But then I think about what about the people that are dealing with that?
Right.
How can I still, even with my gratitude, not be complacent, but actually be proactive and either whether it be send love, prayer, whatever it is that someone can do for someone else, maybe even sending money to humanitarian relief. So I'm asking, I'm kind of talking about this because I want to ask both of you, where does bias show up? When we're protecting our energy and protecting our peace. The reason why I brought up my worldview is because that gives me a bias. I have a bias towards taking not only radical acceptance, but kind of assuming positive intent. I do it a lot, even in some times where probably shouldn't. So where does bias show up, for you when you're protecting your energy, your peace?
Mhm. Wow, that's a great question. When you said bias, the image that came to my mind was polarities. There's the word bi meaning two, and
Mm,
so when we're biased, we're choosing sides. We're either in a positive or a negative default. And when I think and I feel into bias, I see separation, I see competition, I see other, I see them. I don't see us, I don't see we. But when I feel into the emotions of being biased, I'm uh, just being made aware of the tendency that sometimes extremes in either directions can be they can just be extremes, right? Like take for example somebody who's perpetually negative. You could call it like negative default programming. You could take somebody who is perpetually positive default programming. Maybe you've been around somebody that all they ever have to say, regardless of what's going on, oh, well, the sun will come out tomorrow. It's just hyper optimism, which has its place. For me, the middle ground is recognizing the tendency to find safety in either of those. The true safety for me is found in the equanimity and the balance of recognizing that I'm a spiritual being here having a human experience that exists in a 3D realm where there's hot and cold and positive and negative and plus and minus and acid and alkaline. Like we're not going to escape those. So how can we find that middle ground? And for me, I have just fallen into a space of what I've considered perpetual blessings, where I know in this given moment right now that somewhere in the infinite spectrum of experience, the worst atrocity imaginable and the most blissful, uplifting ascension experience imaginable is happening right now. So, where am I going to place my awareness and my attention on in this moment that is going to elicit that state of upliftment, of safety, of inner equanimity, and recognize that in any given moment, I'm being pulled by all of this out here. Come to this side. No, come to this side. No, they're the enemies. We're the victors. Whatever it is, where we're watching it all play out on the grand scheme of the world as the world stage. Every act is divine and every entrance and exit is perfectly timed. So that may have gone just a little deep right now, but that is truly how I feel about this nature of biased tendencies living in this world.
definitely polarity. Go ahead, Jenna. Definitely polarity.
Um, with me listening to you, Chris, I want to go from a different lens of just in life in different groups, whether it's in your family dynamics, in the family culture, business cultures between companies, in your friends group. With me, but even with politics, I'm like independent, and because how I'm wired, I'm very empathetic and the compassion. So I know we know bias exists, but I'm exposed to it, I choose, like, I'm always in the middle, right? Because if I'm like that mediator, because I want unity and harmony, so I'm going to be part of that group is in the center, in the middle. and seeing both sides. And yes, there's going to be the polarity, but it's like, what would love do? And just kind of take that stance, like, I love both parties, and the go from the humanity and what would love do, kind of that energy. And because I'm built of like an empath and lots of love and love centered, I would, take both sides, and see both sides, but then still be at the center, kind of like the neutral party. So that's how when I hear the word bias, I'm just like, okay, there's two different lenses. I'm gonna hear you and see you, but how can I still be neutral in the space? And if I find I'm biased, I have to kind of, you know, cut that out. Like, hey, you're being biased, Jenna. So what would love do? Like, kind of meta, and then see it from a different angle, right? And it's a practice. It's not easy, and so, whether in business, your personal relationships, what's happening in the world, it's just, again, I want to try and be neutral in the center, and to kind of take that mediator role. And it's not hard. It's just, it's super, super hard. It's super, super hard.
Okay, I was like, "Yeah, all right. I didn't know because I
Getting lost in my own.
no problem. That's completely fine. And there's actually a follow-up question. Uh, Risha, forgive me if I pronounced your name incorrectly. Uh, mm, uh, Risha asks, what about the times where you can't take or see both sides, and it's hard to be in the middle?
Yeah. No,
And
it's hard to be in the middle. Trust me, there's a group of us in our family. There's like family conflicts, and even with the holidays, it's so hard. It's so hard. And if you can't, I know it's I don't know, Chris, I'm gonna have to think on that one.
That's
Um
really tough. Yeah. Yeah. I would say the demands of others to choose sides can be overwhelming from a peer pressure perspective, from a family dynamic perspective. They did something wrong. We need to team up against them, hold this grudge. They need to be condemned. Whatever it is, if it's a projection and we recognize that the projection is being projected onto us, what I've started engaging in my own life is realizing that it's just energy, meaning that the positive attribute, the positive condition and the negative condition is the qualitative aspect that we place onto it. Well, that's a positive vibe, that's a negative vibe. But the reality is that it's just energy. So if somebody's going to project onto you their negativity, which is always just a mask for deeper level fear, if you get down to like the bottom of the barrel, it will always distill down to fear, without a doubt. That we can accept that energy, which it's funny in a legal sense, the word for acceptance is honor. One who accepts is one who can honor energy. So we can accept that energy and we can use it to our benefit if we so choose to do it. We can recognize, wow, this person is suffering a lot. I can just merely acknowledge their suffering, not have to take it on as my own and live out that suffering because it's not mine, but I can use that energy for some sort of positive creativity that's not only going to benefit my growth, but those around me as well. I want to use that to uplift mankind. So I feel like that's kind of like emotional or spiritual alchemy in some sense. Funny timing that things would happen like that. Um, but it's just energy, and it's the mind classifying it as positive or negative that seeps into our subconscious that causes us the suffering.
And I would add, just as I was listening to Chris, but fine, because I was stumped on that question, but I would zoom out and just say, whatever the situation is, if you're dealing with that energy, and that energy is like hurtful, it's almost like hurt people really do hurt people. So if there's a group or an individual that's hurting someone else, they've been hurt, and so hurt people do hurt people. And so, and so sometimes the case is, okay, we're on the receiving end of this bad energy because that person or group of people, they're hurt in some ways, and we're on the receiving end of that. And just knowing that they're going through something, hurt people do hurt others, and whether they're in survival mode or whatever space that are in, they're just projecting it. That's how I would answer that. And sometimes through biases and conflict in general, sometimes relationships, they just kind of run their course, and people outgrow people, and then you wish them well, and you just like peacefully part ways. I mean, so that's all I want to just add there.
That makes sense, especially the part ways. Sometimes it's just important to take a break, take a pause.
Mhm.
Even in personal relationships. So now that we're getting down to the end of the time, I mean, I can
I know,
listen to the
yeah,
both
that
of you
was so
all
fast.
day. Um, I want to leave the crowd with a couple of resources, just things that you can take a look at. We plug this book all the time. One of the reasons is because it's just an awesome book, and that's Singer, The Untethered Soul, as it provides not only methods for achieving that inner peace, but really key tools that you can use in the moment to help be peaceful. I like one of the things that I learned from it the most is to not close my heart.
Mm.
Meaning, when someone from the out group, someone even within work, may prick me, so to speak, like a rose, choosing to not close my heart, because then I'm going to end up hurting other people or even hurting myself. And
Mm.
there is one other piece about understanding where we kind of sit in this grand cosmic scheme. And I heard from a poem, so I want to read a poem to everyone. And we'll don't worry about copying this down. We'll send all this to you in our follow up. But it's by an author called Laura Ding Edwards, and it's called The Mountain.
Mm.
It says, if the mountain seems too big today, then climb a hill instead. If morning brings you sadness, it's okay to stay in bed. If the day ahead feels heavy and your plans feel like a curse, then there's no shame in rearranging. Don't make yourself feel worse. If a shower stings like needles and the bath feels like you'll drown, if you haven't washed your hair for days, don't throw away your crown.
Mm.
A day is not a lifetime. A rest is not defeat. Don't think of it as failure, just a quiet, kind retreat. It's okay to take a moment from an anxious, fractured mind. The world will not stop turning while you are getting realigned. The mountain will still be there. When you want to try again, you can climb it at your own time. Just love yourself till then. I absolutely love this poem because it talks about the mountain that's always there. The mountain's going to be there. It's watched us come, it's watched us go, and it's curious because it wants to see the next day. So I always encourage people, be curious to see the next day. Be curious to see what you can improve on going forward. So I want to give it back to my wonderful guides here. We start with Christopher, just a little bit of parting words before we end today.
Well, with this flood of hearts that's just like basking the screen right now, I just can't help but return to the heart energy because it really is the window to the soul as we know. And we know that the heart being here at the center truly is unconditional, and it just loves. And that's what it does. It does so without justification. It loves unconditionally, and it's this neutral, just vortex point in the center of our being in these bodies that gives us the capacity to just love so unconditionally. So, like you were saying, Dr. Dave, choosing in the moment not to close your heart, but instead actively opening your heart and recognizing that, in the sense, hearts were made to be broken because with all the cracks, more light can come in. So it doesn't matter how many times your heart is broken, just know that it's always going to permeate more light, and it's here to love unconditionally. So I would leave this wonderful paneling and opportunity, which has been a real bless honor. Thank you for the invitation to just remind everybody that you have all you need is within you now, and continue just breathing from your heart, and watch your reality change as a result from where you place your attention, because we are paying attention wherever we're placing it. And I'll just leave it at that. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you guys for holding the space for us and giving us your attention and energy, your ears and your eyes. And thank you for being open to taking on these tips. My two things are just connect with nature. If you haven't had a chance to like really lean in and just find some nature and really incorporate it in your life, it'll do some magic. Especially again with all this digital and social media. And then again, a bit off the Michael Singer book, uh, Release the Inner Resistance. So if you really struggle with just finding ways towards inner peace, like if you could just learn how to release, like if you're feeling resistant on the inside, just like surrender, release, and just notice in your body that there'll be a shift. So if there's just too much noise and if you find yourself resisting, just release all that resistance and just let it flow and just get to a space where even if it's just 2 to 5 minutes, it'll make a difference significantly. So I wish you guys all like a happy holiday season, and thank you again. We're so grateful.
Yeah,
Find us
we
on
are. So
the LifeGuides platform if you haven't tried us out yet.
that was gonna be my last thing. So good plug. Find us on the Life Guides platform. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Holidays. I'm excited learning about new traditions. I encourage each of you, go learn a new tradition. Learn something new, because that beginner's mind is where fun begins. So everyone, thank you so much. I appreciate each of you for being on today. This has been wonderful. See you all in the new year. We have some great new pieces coming in, including our book sessions. The Connect events is continuing to grow. Continue to share, like, and subscribe. We appreciate each and every one of you. Have a happy holidays, people.
Bye-bye.